Welcome to Cultural Fluency Makers. I'm your host, David Wellisch. Each week, we welcome leaders to share how they stay ahead of the ever-changing consumer landscape. With today's cultural transformation, top brands need to understand diverse consumer segments from Gen Z, Hispanic, and LGBTQ+, to gamers, wine enthusiasts, and basketball fanatics in Iowa. Their marketing strategies require them to keep the pulse on their consumers, but also their brand in the category to continue to grow revenue for the long term. Cultural Fluency Makers is sponsored by Wellisch Group, the only cultural intelligence engine that provides brand and consumer insights on the why that drives consumer behavior and purchase decisions. Let's get started. So I'm very excited about the episode that it's about to take place. With me today, she's a transformational marketing leader who has built a career helping iconic consumer brands evolve, innovate, and stay culturally relevant in rapidly changing markets. Throughout her career, she's led major marketing transformation and innovation initiatives across the food and consumer packaged goods industry, helping organizations rethink brand strategy, portfolio growth, and how marketing teams operate at scale. Not an easy thing to do these days. Her background spans innovation, leadership, international expansion, portfolio strategy, and cross-functional brand transformation, giving her a unique perspective on how legacy brands can continue to grow in a fast-moving consumer landscape. Beyond her corporate leadership work, she's also passionate about mentoring the next generation of innovators and serves as a food tech mentor with 1871, helping support emerging talent and innovation in the food technology space. Today, she's focused on driving innovation and modernizing marketing ecosystems for some of the most recognizable household brands. She is the VP of Marketing Transformation and Services at Grupo Bimbo. Catherine Berger, so great to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me. You were hired. That was such a flattering introduction.
You know, we've had some initial discussions, so I know this is going to be incredibly useful for our audience. And you've got such an amazing, really set of experiences, trajectory, and you're in a very compelling role given the evolution of marketing. And so with that, Catherine, let's get started. So, given the demographic landscape change that has taken place in this country in the last 10, 15 years, what do you see as the role for cultural intelligence or cultural insights for consumer companies like Bimbo?
I mean, I think it's essential, and it's something that we continue to try to sharpen. I think that if we are blind to culture and to cultural evolution, which is happening, at such a rapid pace at this juncture, then our brands don't evolve. Our brands don't have staying power anymore. I think brands need to deliver more to consumers than a product. It is really a true value proposition. And so if you can understand where consumers are coming from and what their emotional and psychological needs are above their, functional need for nutrition, which of course is important as well. That's how, that's how brands like ours will survive.
And Catherine, it seems like that ought to be such a basic part of marketing, right? Like deep consumer understanding. And what is it hard? Is it hard and or not? And if it's hard, why? What is it hard? What's about it?
I mean, I think you're right. It seems so rudimentary, and I think we say it so often that sometimes it gets canned, like, "Oh, we're consumer centric," and um, sometimes the consumer centricity hits us right in the face before we realize that it's in the room. I I think that I think we get in our own way a lot as marketers because we're so focused on our dollars and cents and our internal initiatives. I think unfortunately, especially in larger organizations, it can be tough to stay grounded in some of those fundamentals. Um, and I also think that it takes a lot of stepping back and sort of regrounding in the human component of what we're doing, and that is difficult to do. It's difficult to say, something here doesn't feel right, or, have we thought about putting this into a, quick test and better understanding a perspective here? Um, it's tough to kind of stop that big ball once it starts rolling down a hill on any one thing. And I think that, um, we owe that to ourselves and to our consumers, in order to kind of continue to recenter consumers' needs.
So as you're speaking, what's coming to my mind is just the need for commercial outcome, the ongoing need for short-term commercial outcome. That's what because when it happens in big companies and small companies, you just gotta execute and, can you take shortcuts? Can you do you really need to go the extra mile? When I am blessed and honored to be having these conversations. I also moderate many roundtables with marketing and insights leaders, and we get to the topic of cultural relevance. And I always ask the question: so how important is it, cultural relevance, to win, consumers' hearts and minds, which everybody wants to do? Um, what can you define it for yourself? Like, what is cultural relevance, and how does a brand become it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, right? I I would say that cultural relevance is mattering. It's funny because at Bimbo we've got a slew of incredibly powerful brands, so much equity. Um, we've got brands that have tremendous awareness and not particularly competitive purchase funnels. Everyone knows them, but no one buys them. And I think, that's that cultural relevance piece, right? And it's not just considerations. Sure, that's part of it, but it's really about being part of a conversation today, whether that's a direct conversation or an indirect conversation. But, I think about, one of my alma maters, Ferrero sent Nutella to the moon. I mean, Nutella is a relevant brand, but now it's a very relevant brand, right? It's in a conversation that the world is having at a time where we kind of need to have a, motivating, rallying conversation. So, I think, every time I think of an example of a legacy brand that started itself around, or, a brand that's having really nice run or has great momentum right now, that cultural relevance piece, like mattering to people for more than just hazelnut and chocolate, is that kind of missing piece that I think is so elusive, because it really it evolves so quickly. I mean, you started the conversation by talking about how this generation and sort of makeup of the United States has changed so much in the last 20 years. It's true that that evolution of culture and therefore cultural relevance is very demanding. And so, it's just again, it's tough to sort of step back and say, does this make sense? Are we just making ads to make ads, or are we really putting our brands at the center of something that means a little bit more than um, sliced bread?
Which at the end of the day is what brand is all about, right? It's the personality. It's all that is the whole concept behind branding and a brand. As you're sharing, Catherine, I was thinking about the Gap as an example in the last, right, 12 months. I mean, right, it's mattering being in the conversation. I mean, they're doing a really nice job.
That's an interesting example. I think, something the Gap has been pretty public on is hiring for leadership roles that understand cultural relevance and really putting people at the helm that are willing to take those risks. And, kind of committing, I'm sure, to shareholders as much as the, consumer, that that's what they're going to focus on. But yeah, they've had a slew of really wonderful culturally relevant campaigns that are really getting them in the
Yes.
conversation. And yeah, I mean, it really does work.
Yes, yes. So you've called listening a superpower in marketing, and I love that. At a global giant company like Bimbo, how do you scale listening so it's not just more data points, but in fact true what we call cultural fluency?
Very difficult, I would say. We've got a couple of programs that I think are sort of codifying what you're talking about. One of the things that for me, I appreciate so much is actually hearing consumers. And I don't mean, looking at a bunch of data. I mean, literally sitting, mirrored wall, or, being out on shopping ethnographies or in homes. I love listening to consumers. I think it can tell you so much. And I think you learn so much. And I know it's expensive and time consuming. But one of the programs that we are starting is really around getting a lot more of our marketers and a lot more of our communications professionals in the room with consumers. And certainly, there are ways to do that. But I think that, you know, when especially when people who are not typically in those rooms are able to be in there, it really dimensionalizes what they're doing, and it really drives to deep, deep insights, and it inspires to activate against them. I, I've mentioned Sara Lee in sort of a veiled context, but Sara Lee is an incredible brand with really high quality, portfolio, and people absolutely love it. And when you hear people talk about the meaning it has in their lives, and some of the memories and some of the nostalgia, but also, the role that it plays, it's so much deeper than just sandwich bread. And so I think it really is inspiring to bring that to life and to kind of codify the role that that plays in people's lives. So that voice of the consumer program is one that we're really excited to bring to life. And I think, you know, we do a lot of category type of listening, and we're starting to shift into a little bit more future forward, thinking more about trends, thinking more about where people are going, and focusing a little bit less on what are people buying, and a little bit more on how are people's needs shifting. And I think that that is also another way to listen and to build that sort of cultural fluency.
I love that. And congrats on the getting closer to customers because in the world of AI, we're going to be in tension.
Both are important, you know what I mean? But it is easier now to not spend time directly with consumers.
And yet, exactly like you shared, for us and even for Collage, understanding our customers is just gold. And for us, and then B, we've always started the company with a clear definition on the why behind anything. And so that's what we do. We begin there, and then you begin to strategize, but understand consumers, and where they are today and how they're changing. A lot of answers come from that. So we began mentioning and talking about AI, and we're gonna get into it a little bit more now. It's so interesting. I think when you, depending on what articles and what day you open the paper, that most leaders talk about AI right now. There's a lot of cost cutting linkage to AI. Um, you focus on marketing transformation, which is it's like wow, what a great time of really having that role, because I think that roles like that are going to become more important over time, in the corporate context. How is Bimbo currently using AI to deepen the emotional connection between a consumer and a snack cake or a loaf of bread?
It's a great question. I think it's a pretty multifaceted answer. I think we're doing a lot of the, productivity and work efficiency types of initiatives, and I think those are very important. Um, One of the things that we've continued to build is really the ability to let artificial intelligence tools do a lot of the processing and enable our people to do a lot of the critical thinking. And you said about asking why. I had a former boss and mentor who always used to say, ask why 5 times before you say anything. You know what I mean? Like just really contemplate, okay, why is that true? Why is that true? Why is that true? And I think we've got some agentic capabilities as it relates to reviewing, massive quantitative studies and kind of pulling nuggets out of them and things like that. And I think we continue to push on that critical thinking and okay, you can we absolutely want to leverage machine learning, but we want to build on top of that and be very curious. We don't want the machines to replace curiosity. And so, we've been kind of building that way. We've also been able to leverage AI. I don't want to tip our cards, but we've got some really cool, very, I think, relevant consumer centric campaigns and platforms launching over the next few months that are AI driven or AI enabled. And it really does, we've got over 40 brands, and it's very difficult to really bring 40 brands to life and do them justice. But through AI, we are able to do some really cool types of activations and do that at scale in a way that we couldn't before. So we're definitely experimenting in that way too. Um, and hope to continue to do that in a way that is relevant to our consumer and relevant for our brands.
That's fantastic. It seems like innovation and experimentation must be the name of the game.
I think that's a great takeaway. Yeah. Yeah. We can't be afraid to just try something and see how it goes. Absolutely.
And fail. If we're not failing, we're not failing, we're not trying hard enough. Catherine, you've stated that creative is the most important driver of effective marketing. As AI begins to generate more and more content, how do you ensure that the human soul, the emotional resonance of storytelling doesn't get lost in this super efficient machine that we're building?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I've seen some really cool use cases from other brands that are so far along in their journey with AI and, literally have created entire worlds with AI. And I think there is a time and a place. I think ultimately understanding what that story is before you're turning to AI is super critical. What value are you bringing to the consumer? And how do you want to present that value? And then I think, if used properly, I think AI can unlock how that story is told. There's a really wonderful case study. I don't want to get the brand name wrong, but it's a cat food brand. And I had no idea how many rules and regulations there were around using felines in advertising, but there are apparently a lot. And it was an Omnicom case study. They AI enabled them to dress up the cat in a way that they wouldn't have been able to. So you're talking about, very low risk because you're not manipulating product, of course. You wouldn't want to do that. It enabled the story to really come to life. The campaign was all about the treat gap and dogs getting more treats than cats and cats getting, sort of equal treats. And it's really cute, really well done, but it to me was such a great example of like the stories there, and they're leveraging the technology to tell the story. And I think as long as we can continue to be really clear on the story that we're telling and the value that we're bringing, we should bring it to life, you know, and sometimes in some cases you can bring it to life much more beautifully and holistically. But then I've also seen examples where it's like just AI generation, change the background, change the color,
Yeah.
change this, dynamic creative it, see how well it can perform. And there's certainly a time and a place for, kind of straight performance marketing. But I feel like if you're not really thinking about building equity and bringing your brand to life in a way that resonates with consumers, then that performance marketing is sort of a dead end.
I am seeing, it seems like the pendulum is beginning to swing a little back to branding.
I think so too.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. And I mean, it's interesting, obviously, what we're gonna see in the next 6 months and year in terms of experimentation. I think will be fascinating. Um, with AI driven insights, we can see trends faster than ever. I mean, as you know, we're using AI on top of our own proprietary data. How do you balance again the speed of AI insights with the slow nature of of the food supply chain and physical retail?
Yeah, it's super interesting because there is like quite a stark juxtaposition between, the speed of technology today and then uh, some of the legacy sort of components to our business. But we have been really thinking about our ecosystem as a series of partnerships. And so, you know, speaking specifically about, for instance, our retail partners, or, the partners that are helping us with fulfillment, and really approaching it as a, rising tide lifts all boats. We really want to work together to get to solution. And, I would say that the specifically a lot of our retail partners have really taken us along on the journey, and vice versa, as they're developing, the way that they talk to consumers, the way that they compel shopping decisions and those sorts of things. So, you know, I think that I think that we just have to continue to sort of push for adoption, but also productive adoption of a lot of the tools.
Across the ecosystem, because you can't just, I mean, it's all dependent on one another.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, there are some things that technology will not speed up, right? Like it's probably still going to take us 5 to 6 weeks to get plates made to make packaging, right? There's probably not a world where that moves faster in the near future. So there are elements like that, are still very analog, and as far as I can tell, will stay like that for a little while.
Last question in the AI section, which is synthetic audiences. It's the I think the acceptance level is beginning to increase. We were at a conference. I was at Possible a couple of weeks ago in Miami. Were you there?
Briefly, yes.
Okay. Well, it was very interesting. The CMO of US Bank did a demo on their use of synthetic audiences, and you think regulated industry, right? You don't think of banks as the most innovative, and they're all in. What's your take?
You know, Maybe I'm a doubter. We haven't really run like full scale tests. I've done some playing around, and some folks on my team have done some playing around, and I think that it still feels pretty shaky. I've seen a lot of hallucinations on very basic questions. I think there's probably a viable use case if you're consistently feeding a model with real consumer feedback over a very elongated period of time. Um, so I think it will evolve, but I'm not super trusting of it right now. And I worry about the nuance because I really do believe that human to human, hearing and understanding what people say, maybe not directly from their mouths all the time, but there is an element of nuance that is kind of the beauty of what we do. And machines can erase that entirely. Um, and that's the part that probably scares me the most and feels like it's going to take a lot longer for us to get sharp on.
It's it is fascinating. Obviously, we're all based on today the human, the real data. And I, we will experiment with augmented, right? In combining it, and again, experimentation. But it seems like it is moving pretty fast in the market, and maybe because of the impact on speed and cost, that will be a trade-off, right, on other things. You have been, Catherine, deeply involved in building breakthrough innovation functions, and as we talked about, reshaping marketing ecosystems. What do you think separates companies that are able to successfully transform their organizations to the ones that get stuck and struggle to evolve? What are the secrets?
I love this question, because it's something I think about a lot and something I really, kind of live every day. I think that the companies that I've been a part of, that have really succeeded in transforming, um, reward ingenuity. So I think there's an element of, enabling and even incentivizing people to think differently. Um, Unfortunately, I think most corporate environments heavily incentivize execution, and that's important. But it is very difficult to go from point A to point B without a level of, um, doing things differently and thinking differently. And I also think there's an element of great ownership. So, early on in my tenure here, I was talking to a colleague and they said, I don't know who has the decision right. I would have to think about, who in the RISI would be the one to decide. And I'm like, if we don't know if it's you and I thinking it's the right move and, more or less we own 3/4 of the, functions that would touch it, let's just assume it's our decision and then the decision's been made. And they're like, I might need to ask someone. And I'm like, I'm going to assume that I'm the decision maker until someone comes over and tells me I'm not. So I think there's an element of just kind of going and running and really, um, seeing what needs to be done and doing it. And then, organizations that reward that, not to a fault, but, kind of enabling those independent operators to break things a little bit. You talked about failing earlier, and I think that's another one. It has to be okay to say we tried this and it didn't work. But now we're trying that. It's not just a one and done failure. It's, a constant failure. And I think that also has to come from the top. We have to be comfortable saying, well, we thought this was the best path forward. Now we know it's not. We're going to move in this direction. And I think as a leader, it's something that, it's something that I've constantly been working on saying, here's what I thought made sense. Now I don't think that makes sense. Or, giving other folks the opportunity to correct you. Hey, have you thought about this? I'm not sure. Um, Adam Grant has a Think Like a Scientist program that I think is really nice, because it separates people into, uh, most people, according to Adam Grant, think like a prosecutor. So they're kind of, constantly saying why their ideas are right and other people's ideas are wrong, or like a preacher, which, he lovingly classifies most marketers into, right? I'm just going to tell you all about these great ideas and, get you to come along with me on this journey. But instead, he talks about thinking like a scientist and goes back to asking why. And it goes to sort of having a hypothesis and proving it out. And I think that that is a pretty different mentality for most corporate leaders. And one that I talk about a lot with my team is, and I try to use to reframe my thinking too. What's the hypothesis here? How are we going to, um, you know, get our proof that it works and move forward?
Catherine, I'm sensing a strong enterprising spirit. That's what I'm sensing, and as an entrepreneur, um, I love that. I mean, it is what makes the world go around.
It's so fun.
It really is.
There's nothing more fun than seeing an opportunity and bringing it to life.
Going for it, exactly.
Yeah, and, it's funny, there's a few things in my career that just didn't come to fruition that I still think were just awesome ideas, but there's also a handful of things that have come to fruition, and by the way, are also awesome ideas and things that came to fruition that weren't, but there's nothing more rewarding, I think, than saying, "Hey, this could be really cool. Let's go figure out how to make it happen." That's certainly what gets me out of bed in the morning.
It's coming through. It's coming through. I can sense it. Last question on the business side of things. As consumer expectations continue to change, where do you see the biggest opportunities for brands to create meaningful connection and long-term loyalty? There's so much noise out there.
Even personally, when I think about my life as a consumer, there's a few sort of maybe technical breakthroughs that I have found to be really enticing. But the reason that they're enticing is because they give me some type of value, whether that's time or connection. And I think the brands that understand what they're selling and elevate themselves in order to do that better. So one example is I used to make a protein shake every morning for myself. Anymore, I buy the ready-made Fairlife protein and the ultra filtered milk. I didn't even realize what that was until I started looking into it more, and it's super convenient. I eat that with a piece of fruit, and it saves me 15 or 20 minutes, and I'm off on my day. And I think little things like that feel like they make a big difference. And from what I understand about that brand and that team is that they understand what they're selling. They understand what value they're giving to people. And I just think that that is, kind of the unlock is what are we actually giving? I recognize that we're selling bread or we're selling snack cakes or we're selling donuts, but actually we're selling, an act of love or shared connection, nostalgia, memories. So I think brands that really understand that are going to be very successful, and brands that don't, I think, unfortunately, will become commoditized or disrupted.
It goes back to intelligence. It goes back to um, that's fantastic. Well, we're gonna shift for two questions that are much more personal in nature. The first one is, what motivates you, Catherine, to do what you do every day? What inspires you? What motivates you?
I love working with people, and I'm very motivated by shared missions, and I just have found I've been very lucky over the course of my career in all directions to have really wonderful working relationships built on trust. And there's something pretty special about accomplishing something together and, trusting that someone is holding up their end of the bargain and making discoveries together. I really just love that sort of shared human experience. And I really like building. I really like, there's some things that I'll see in market and I'll be like, I remember I was in the room when we came up with that idea or when we said, I wonder if we could do X, Y, or Z, or how hard would it be to do Y? And so I just feel like that like tingling of possibility is super motivating and exciting. And I feel very lucky because I get to be in a position where I see that little twinkle of possibility almost every single day. And that gets me very excited.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, that's remarkable.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate.
Yeah, well, we're gonna end the show. I always end the show with this one question, which is geared towards our younger audience that I think is in need of wisdom these days, which is if you could travel back in time and give your 20-year-old self advice, what would that be?
You know, you told me you were gonna ask this question, and I still feel like it's such a big, heavy question. You know, I think that my 20-year-old self would be really proud. Oh, geez, I didn't mean to get emotional. I think I was just in my first office. It was I had an internship at PhD, and it's in the news building in New York. And I remember walking in that first day and thinking, I have made it. I had an official badge. It had my name on it. It had like a, beautiful marble entrance and elevators. And I just felt like, I figured it all out. Um, and I was in that building and I was thinking back, like the feeling, it hasn't left. Like that feeling just standing there, I was like, oh my goodness, I still sort of feel like it's my first day. Um, and, I think that wonder is very special. And if you can hold on to that feeling and find something that gives you that sense of like, wow, I get to do this, that I think is something that, you know, I don't know that I could have predicted that my career would go the way it's gone, but I've been so lucky because I've been able to continually find and gravitate towards and let myself, say, that seems so interesting. I have to go do it. And so every time I've gotten an opportunity or heard something, um, so and so's starting a tech consultancy, I'm like, that sounds so interesting. I've got to go be a part of that. And so I think, if you can continue that renewed spirit of like curiosity and excitement, your career will just take you where it's meant to take you.
So beautifully said. Thank you. And thanks for sharing. I've got 3 kids between 20 and 20s and 30s. I'm going through my last college graduation this coming week.
Congratulations. That's so exciting.
So we talk a lot about careers, and you were pointed by curiosity. I think about it as energy. Follow that energy, whether it's curiosity, awe, wonder. So, anyways, we have arrived at the end of the show, Catherine. I wanna thank you so much for indulging us, indulging the audience, sharing candidly about your journey, and I also want to congratulate you on an incredible journey.
Thank you. That's so kind. This was super fun. Thanks for, asking such thoughtful questions. And the journey's still underway. So
Yes, yes. Well, thank you again, and this has been another exciting episode of Cultural Fluency Makers. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Cultural Fluency Makers. Thank you for joining us. Please share your comments and what you would like to hear more about. Be as specific as possible. For show notes and more, please visit culturalfluencymakers.com. This show is proudly sponsored by Wellisch Group, unleashing the power of cultural intelligence to fuel brand growth. Please follow Wellisch Group on LinkedIn, and we will see you next week.